to Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish and thank our host this evening, Father Greg Bonin, for welcoming us. My name is John Capucci. I'm the president of Assumption University, which is the Catholic University in Windsor. And on behalf of my friend and colleague, Father Dennis Greco, who is the rector of St. Peter's Seminary, we'd like to welcome you this evening for our panel entitled Next Steps, Women Walking with the Synodal Church. And this is a historic moment because it showcases the coming together of two Catholic institutes of higher learning, Assumption University and St. Peter's Seminary. And I think we need more of that. So thank you to Father Dennis for the speech. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Three Fires Confederacy, comprised of the Odawa, the Ojibwa, and the Potawatomi. We are grateful to learn, live, and work on these traditional lands. As I mentioned, this evening is a joint endeavor sponsored by both Assumption University's Christian Culture Series, which goes back to the 1930s, and St. Peter's Seminary. Before we begin, and I introduce our panelists, we are also joined this evening by our bishop and the chancellor for both St. Peter's Seminary and Assumption University, though he doesn't get a paycheck from either, our Bishop Ronald Peter Favreau.
Thank you, John. Congratulations again to you, John, for being awarded the King Charles III Gold Medal. Well deserved as well. Thank you. Dear brothers and sisters, it's been a real privilege for me over the past couple of years to have such a positive experience of being a synodal church. A church really that listens to all voices that we need to hear from each other if we are to discern how the Holy Spirit is moving and guiding our church forward. The group that I've had in our diocese, I've seen how they have gathered together, even though they may disagree on issues, how when they come together and go through a synodal process of listening to each other, where there's a respect for each of the people in the group, what we call conversations in the Spirit, that it enables that group to hear each other and to discern how the Holy Spirit is guiding our church forward. One of the key areas that arose from the Synod of Bishops in Rome over the last couple of years has been hearing the voice of women. We need to listen to the voice of women in our church. We need to know the contribution of women, and we need their leadership in all areas of our church, in the life of our church, and in the mission of our church. If we are to discern how the Holy Spirit is guiding us forward, and if we are to hear the cries of justice, we need to listen to women. Our four panelists have made great contributions in our diocese and also at St. Peter's Seminary. I'm looking forward to their presentations this evening of how women can be recognized and included in our church. So I offer my congratulations for this panel to Assumption University and St. Peter's Seminary, and I know I join with you in looking forward to these presentations.
Thank you, Bishop Favreau. At this time, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We'll start on the far end. Dr. Maha El-Raiz is a settlement counselor at Windsor Women Working with Immigrant Women, or as we say in Windsor, W5. She holds a PhD in construction engineering and management, and her professional qualifications in leadership and enterprise from the University of Manchester and the London Business School, both in the United Kingdom. Maha is also a very proud alumna of Assumption University's Graduate Diploma in Catholic Studies, and she is an active parishioner at Holy Family Chaldean Catholic Church, and also works sacraments at Assumption Church in Windsor. So welcome to Dr. Maha. Dr. Moira McQueen is the director of the Canadian Catholic Bioethics Institute at the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto. She holds a PhD in moral theology and has taught at St. Michael's College for over 30 years. She has also served on the International Theological Commission and the Second Synod on Marriage in the Family. She currently serves on the Board of Governors of St. Peter's Seminary and the Senate of Assumption University. Welcome, Dr. Moira McQueen. Miss Linda Stout was appointed by Pope Francis to the 16th General Assembly of the Synod of Bishops in Rome as a voting delegate. She was also chair and lead writer of the Synod synthesis team for the Assembly of Catholic Bishops of the Province of Ontario and the co-chair of the Synod Committee for the Diocese of London. She has over 30 years of experience working for the Catholic school boards in both Windsor and London, including 8-year term as the Director of Education at the London District Catholic School Board. Welcome, Linda Stout. And we have Professor Angela Townend here. She holds the Toldo Research Chair for the Advancement of Human Formation and is an assistant professor at St. Peter's Seminary in London. Her work includes counseling seminarians and students, teaching, and researching. She holds credentials in social work, having spent 30 years in the field. And in addition to her work at St. Peter's, Angela is also an adjunct professor in the Department of Family Medicine at the School of Medicine and Dentistry at the University, Western University. So we welcome Professor Townend. So what we'll do is we'll begin with several questions, and then we'll open up the floor for some questions from the audience. Some of the panelists have actually asked if they can start on some of the questions. So we'll direct it towards them first, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the panel. So we'll start off with the first question, and it reads, a synodal church is inclusive and participatory. It's a church that listens, discerns, and walks together in faith. As women who are walking with the synodal church, each in your own unique way, please share what has been your journey. Angela, you're looking at me, so why don't we start there?
I would say my journey is, it's been on two levels. Certainly in a personal way, but also as on faculty at St. Peter's. When you work at a seminary, you are obliged to keep up with what's going on in the church, and that can be a lot. Certainly, I'm still, like some of you, probably learning what exactly do we mean by a synodal church, and I sometimes use the term interchangeably with co-responsible. Sometimes that does go better with some people. It's a sense of recognizing all of our gifts and our contributions that we all need to bring to our diocese, to our parish. I think on a personal level, and this comes from, sorry, I'm going to be a social worker for a minute, is when it comes to women's voices, I'm in working with so many women over, and thank you, it's actually 35 years, but thank you for 30, that's I'm not sure women are as aware of their gifts as they sometimes need to be, and sometimes even if they're aware, I'm not sure if we share them as good as we could, and I think there's probably different reasons for that, so that is one of my hopes, and I include myself in that. What are my gifts, and am I sharing them? Am I, initiating that with my own parish? So I think my own journey, there's been a growing self-awareness of a synodal church means, as a woman, and we want more women's voices at the table, I have to know my gifts and I have to be bold and share those. So again, that's probably my one hope that comes from this.
Thank you. I have two journeys, one pre-retirement and one post-retirement. So pre-retirement, I had the gift of serving as a Catholic educator for 36 years. 25 was right here in Windsor, and then the remaining in the London area. And it really was a gift in terms of walking with the church as a Catholic educator. And we realized that in Ontario, what a gift we have to have fully funded Catholic education. So I retired 2 years earlier than I thought I would. And then I'm thinking, so this is now the end of COVID, and I'm thinking, okay, now what do I do? So some said in a weak moment, I'm saying in a wise moment. I said to Bishop Favreau, is there anything that you need? Well, he jumped on that immediately. And the next thing, he's saying that we're going to establish in the diocese a synod committee. And just in terms of what Angela just said, in terms of synod, okay, I have some research to do, because I'm not sure what this entails at all. All I know, it's bishops, and it's usually in Rome. Well, one thing led to another, and I really thought that my claim to fame was, and Bishop Favreau didn't tell me this, I was asked to present the Ontario report to the bishops, all of the bishops in Canada. So I'm looking out, so instead of having just one row of black suits, it was the whole room. And anyways, was very pleased to present the Ontario report. And then after, Bishop Favreau told me the rest of the story, that it was the first time that a lay woman had presented at a plenary to the Catholic bishops. And I truly thought that was my claim to fame. And then the Pope made the announcement that he wanted to be more inclusive at the Synod. Now, the planning had really been really far along. So this was not convenient in any way, shape, or form in terms of now adding 70 lay people. So it was women and youth. Unfortunately, I only fit under one of the categories. So Bishop Favreau put my name forward, and I'm just honored now that my name got put forward, not thinking anything of it. It's now the end of June, and the Synod was starting right at the end of September, and I get the phone call, and it says Ontario, it says, yeah, Ontario Catholic Bishops, and I'm thinking, no, it can't be. And then it was, and then the first thing I said, I think I need to sit down right now. But what a journey it has been in terms of not just 1 year, but 2 years. And what I can say, so I'll just share this and then I'll pass on the mic. So when you get there, we have a badge and it says table 21, chair 11. And the first thing when you come into any room, you're wondering, okay, who am I sitting with? So find my seat and I'm looking around, and everybody's being seated. And it quickly became evident that I'm the only layperson and I'm the only woman. And they could not, the bishops and the cardinals, could not have been more respectful or wanting to hear what my voice was on two fronts. One as a woman, but also as an educator. And the other part was that not only did I get to spend 4 weeks in Rome in 2023, I got to spend another 4 weeks in 2024. And what a gift that was. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Oh, no, sorry. I'm just getting to know myself. Excuse me. Anyway, my journey has been possibly a little bit different because, as John announced, I was on the International Theological Commission for 5 years. And incidentally, it's made up of 30 people all the time. 25 of them were priests, so I know what you mean about the rows of black suits. And 5 of us were lay people, 3 were religious sisters, and 2 of us were lay. I was the only one married on the whole commission at that point, which proved to be of interest. When you're on the ITC, you have to write 3 documents. That's your charge over the 5 years. And very fortunately for me, one of them was the document on synodality. And the reason why we chose synodality, and this was in 2013, was just there was that growing awareness, I think, in theological circles in particular, that things were changing a little bit, that the idea even of lay people being involved more and more, although that was sort of thought about at the Second Vatican Council. But this was suddenly crystallized in actually doing this particular document, which meant because it was a theological commission, we had to look back at scripture, at the theological mandates, all these things about, and looking back at the historical roots of synodality, recognizing that synods have been there since the time of the apostles, and then it went into abeyance for a while, and reintroduced again after the Second Vatican Council, because the bishops themselves needed a place where they could have a voice. And so that particular way of doing synodality actually from the Second Vatican Council encompassed some lay people. So I learned a fair bit just in terms of doing that research and having to write that document, and just found the whole experience really fascinating, both in its theological underpinnings and also realizing what an opportunity there is there already in the church, that this is not really new. It's a new way of doing synodality, but synodality itself was not new. But as I said, had got somewhere lost along the way, and then it was coming back. I had a second opportunity at the second synod on marriage and the family to be part of that synod, and it wasn't done the same way. It was the more old-fashioned way, where 54 of us were lay people, and we sat at the back. And of course the cardinal sat at the front, and then the archbishops and the bishops, and that was fair enough. It was a very, very interesting experience because because I'd been learning about it theologically, it was really interesting to be there in person at an actual synod and to see what happened. And again, it was very inspiring just in terms of, at that particular synod, everybody in the room, cardinals and lay, and everybody in between, if I can say it that way, got 3 minutes to speak, and you could choose your own topic. And it was just a case of everybody chose their favourite topic that was to be voiced, and we did that. So there was a sense of sort of egalitarianism. And then when I went back to the ITC when we were finishing the document, at that point it was Cardinal Muller, who was the chair from the congregation then for the Doctrine of the Faith, who was the chair of the committee. Because I'd been at the synod, I suggested in the group that I really thought that lay people should be allowed to vote, so not just women, but lay people who were not allowed to vote. The rest of the people who were writing the document vehemently disagreed with me. Cardinal Muller didn't say anything, so that was good. He didn't say no, he didn't say yes. But I didn't feel it was very supportive. But it was just something, this was not about power. People say, oh, you want to vote because the church is not a democracy. Well, it's not. But I just felt if people are at the synod and they're participating and they're contributing, they're not just there to listen, why couldn't they vote on all the motions that were put at the end of the assembly? So I can tell you I was absolutely thrilled when Pope Francis in particular advocated for that change, and so lay people can now vote at the synod as well as everybody else. It had nothing to do with me, I can assure you, but I was just so glad that other people were seeing that perspective, because I think we all have a voice. And so I was able to represent people on the ITC and at the synod, but I think it has to be wider than that. And it's absolutely true that the document we wrote on synodality is talking about that. That if we're talking about synodality, it's about everybody having a voice, no matter how that's done, and that's quite hard to implement, I recognize that. But that's the goal, that's the mission, that's the aim. And so you can tell I feel pretty strongly about synodality for women, but also for lay people in general.
Good evening. However, my background is not just like other ladies in here. Actually, I came from a very scientific background, but actually I was so devoted to the church since my childhood. I came from a family. My grandfather was a deacon as a first degree, and also that was always attending masses, not missing any events in the church. So after my, when I became as adolescent, I started serving the church with a different way. So that was actually in Baghdad, Iraq, my hometown. So we have many Christians there, and then the mosque congregation, the majority was Chaldean. So we served the church, and then later we immigrated to different countries because of the war and what happened in our country. But however, we didn't miss our road and how to follow the steps. I went to England, and in England I also showed my devotion in there, because this is part of my life. Without I can call it the leadership of my Lord, I think I missed something in my life. So, however, so I served in different places in United Kingdom, especially in Leeds, in the church called like Holy Rosary and St. Anne. So later, when I came to Canada, I followed also more like services. Actually, we have here in Windsor a Chaldean church, called Holy Family Chaldean Catholic Church, and I started like working with them as a volunteer. But the priest asked me because you have like good background with your education, you can like benefit other people. So I started studying, actually joining societies like we call it it's in America, it's South America. So it's Institute of Catholic Culture. I attended all the lectures in there. I got certificates, so I promote myself. And then beside that, I was like serving the church with all means. I was a catechist, and leading the school, Saturday school, and also served as for the youth ministry and many other parts. I would tell something very important in our church, as a church that been established here in 2011, and we have the eparchy in New Toronto. The role of the woman is not that very clear, and we have people working with us, and then they're wearing white, and they call themselves deaconess. But actually, I touched base. It's not as a practice. It's only an exception for a church or maybe a diocese. We need to go more and then give these ladies more chances to educate themselves and to be more devoted, and they have following the doctrine of the Catholic Church. So this is going to be effect positively on our new generations. So I hope that, and then if you have any suggestion, I can write it down, and then we need to discuss it with our priest, with our bishop in Toronto, and more. I'm expecting today one of our priests gonna join us, but I can't see him in the hall. He confirmed to be here. Actually, we have another church called St. Thomas, the Assyrian Catholic Church. So Father Minos promised to come, but I can't see him. Maybe he's gonna join later. So he got many things to say about the role of the woman in the church, especially the churches from the East, and who have been immigrated to the diaspora, like Canada or America or Australia or other places. So I hope I'm gonna see him maybe in 30 minutes. So we're gonna talk about this, more, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, everyone. The next question, and again, not because Angela's next to me, I don't want to be picking on it, but it's about seminarians. And the question is, how do we best prepare seminarians to cultivate the characteristics that would enable them, once ordained as priests, to work collaboratively and so effectively alongside women in the church? So given your work at St. Peter's, you would be ideal for this question.
Thank you. I'm lucky because I wear 3 different hats as seminary faculty, doing research and counseling. There are endless ways, I believe, to integrate a more synodal way of being church in the formation of the men. I'm going to make a plug for the research I'm doing here right now, which is I've been talking to priests from different dioceses across Canada around character formation. And the question one of the questions posing to them is, if this is what we suspect a synodal church is to be like, what are the characteristics of a pastor that is going to thrive and work effectively? And of course, one of those questions is around working with women. So there are so many ways to integrate that. I'm a behaviorist at heart, so it's about taking research and knowledge and how do you bring that to life in the seminary. So in the fall, we are going to be having a synodal session with the men, and I'm kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. Our topic is going to be working with women in the church. So it's going to be a way to teach them some of the dynamics of synodal process, the active listening. Okay, it's not a discussion. Discussion, share ideas, come to a decision. It's a dialogue. And the dialogue, part of it is I listen really well to gain new insights. Maybe to explain my point in a different way, maybe even change my mind about something. So getting them to understand dialogue as opposed to discussion, and just simply becoming better listeners. Usually we're not as good listeners. We tend to think that we are. There's so much chatter up here. So I think there's a lot of behavioral ways we can do this with the men. I think the other thing, and this is coming from my research, I think we do need to talk about gender bias. We all have it. I've been kind of looking at my own self. We're a big football family, and sometimes when the commentator is a female and she's really beautiful, I'm like, she really knows as much about football as that guy who used to play. And I'm like, that's crazy. And I said that to my husband, and he said, she's one of the smartest commentators on the NFL channel, right? So I had the bias about a female. So great book, if you got a chance to read it, called The Authority Gap, because it looks at this systemic how women are perceived sometimes to not have authority, especially if they're in leadership. Apparently women are interrupted 4 more times than men in meetings, so not a knock against men, right? And sometimes that they're being interrupted by other women. So I really would like to help do some education with the men. We all have those biases, I have them, and just to be aware of them. It doesn't make us an awful person, but I think a synodal church is going to raise the voices of women, then men have to, seminarians are going to be priests. We have to address that there might be areas in which they could grow, especially for women in leadership, not just, lay women. Sorry, yeah, not just lay women. Oops, did it I have 3 boys, I can scream.
In the meantime, we'll talk loud.
I'm going to stop there. I will let Linda, but again, lots of different ways we can do this with the men. And it starts with education and bringing the issues at the table, but it's a practice. We can't just have a workshop on this is a synodal church and go away and this is what you do. It's a way of being church, and the Pope has said that several times. It becomes the culture. And someday probably we just won't know any other way, and I think that will be a good day.
I don't think I have anything to add.
Moira, Maha, anything to add?
Oh, I have something to add. If we just provide, to add something to provide sensitivity, gender training for the seminarians. What do you think about this one? To accept women to be in leadership beside the seminarians or clergy.
Absolutely, and I think that until you start talking about it, you might think, well, I am like that. I'm good. I'm good with women. Sometimes it's good with women as long as you have some authority over it. You have the final say. I think it's sometimes when women are in leadership, it's new for some men, and that some of the seminarians know they've come to seminary with a background where they've had a supervisor, they had a life outside. Sometimes with the younger men, it would be new. There's also cultural differences too. Some men grow up in cultures where that's a real challenge for them, and that's different. And I think that again, it's a matter of doing some enculturation around those issues. If women are going to have more of a voice, then we have to look at what those barriers might be, and that is one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could I just add that's a big one? Because I've had many seminarians in my classes over the years in the theology faculty, and I just distinctly remember one student, I won't mention the country he came from, but he came up to me afterwards and he said, I'm just not used to having women professors, so you just have to give me time. And I did. And he learned.
On the next question, we're going to move to roles of women in the church. If the church doesn't have the authority to ordain women as priests, what alternative leadership roles should be expanded for women? Linda, do you want to start?
What I can share is during our time when we were in Rome, obviously now it's the first time that women were there, people tend to focus just on the ordained. and not so much as lay leadership. And the game changer now really has been Pope Francis. And so here we are coming together as a synod of bishops, and you have 300 of them, 70 of us. And he appoints Sister Natalie as the undersecretary. So now here's a woman. Just recently, he put a sister in charge of dicastery. So I think this is the first time that you would have now a cardinal reporting to a sister. So what really came out in our discussions in Rome is, can we really take a look, whether you're in a parish, whether you're in a diocese, what are those responsibilities that are not in terms of by virtue of you being ordained? So in the diocese, I'm going to use an example that just came out. Bishop Favreau just named Sharon Wright Evans as the bishop's delegate. That was the first time that would have been held by a woman. You have other dioceses now that the canon lawyer is a woman. So it's really looking at what are those other in your parish or in your diocese that women can do that doesn't require you to be ordained. That's a select few, but there's so many other positions within the church that women could have, and now it's just opening ourselves and as to what the possibilities are. And again, I just cite, in our diocese alone, we have a director of human resources, which probably at one point was just a male, is a woman. You have a director of accounting, who is a woman. So we're seeing here in our own parish, we have a business manager who is a woman. These would have been positions at one time that would have only been held by men for no reason, that women easily could have. And I just go back to my own history. When I started teaching next door at Brennan, I was the only female science teacher. So and then I became an administrator, and then there was few of us. So it's breaking down and just really looking at what those other opportunities are for women that do not require you to be ordained.
Thank you, Linda. And I agree absolutely about the number of women who've been appointed to high levels in the dicasteries, and a woman professor who is now the head of the Angelicum University in Rome. So it's not only there, of course, there are many Catholic universities where the president is a woman, and so I think there are changes all over the place. And if we're talking about within the church, again, you're absolutely right, Linda, I can think of several dioceses of women chancellors, people who are in tribunals, women just, mainly now because of what women can do. It's not so much a gender thing as who's qualified, and for most of us that makes perfect sense. In my own case, with the Bioethics Institute, as Bishop Favreau knows, we're frequently consulted by the Catholic bishops. And I think it's important that people recognize that the bishops consult widely, that they don't just talk, they talk to lay people, they talk to lay people who are involved in the areas in which they want to gain some more understanding as well. And it makes sense again, that that's the way it should be. And I think it's true, it's a slightly slow process. We're talking about here within the church. I mean, women are going on in greater strides in business and law and many other areas as well. But it's gratifying, I think, to see that women are being recognized for their leadership skills within the church. And it doesn't have to be at these very high levels. I think everybody who's selected to be in a parish council, or anybody who organizes a Catholic Women's League, or anybody who's doing anything like that that's actually involved in either Catholic education or some form of evangelization, these are leadership roles. The Catholic Women's League, for example, in Canada, has a yearly meeting with the Prime Minister's office, and they talk to him about what the League would like to see happen. I'm not pretending for 1 minute any Prime Minister actually carries that out, but they do have that opportunity, and they're recognized as having some clout, if you like. So to me, it's just a matter of time, with the gender balance being fairly even, 50-50, with more women being in higher education, that it will gradually just morph into more women being recognized for the leadership skills that they have.
I have only one thing to add, sometimes when I look for anybody to change the policy, I have to look for the regulations to improve it. So maybe to include more like, teaching or supporting social justice topics and the equality between genders. So this is very important to include in anybody, however it's going to be like, it's a diocesan like body or something like that. So this is going to help to orient like the new generation about to how to deal regardless the gender. That's what I'm saying. So thank you.
This is like the hot potato.
Yeah.
Sweating.
We mentioned the laity quite a bit in this last question. So the next question is for Linda, but for everyone as well, is how do we foster a church that encourages, and it's a term that I believe Linda is from the Synod, if I'm not mistaken. So how do we foster a church that encourages co-responsibility between the laity and the clergy?
I'm sure everyone has read the entire document, but in case it's been a while, the term co-responsibility is really throughout, and it was really core to our work in Rome. Let me start off by saying Father Timothy Ratcliffe, who the first year was Father Timothy Ratcliffe, now is Cardinal Timothy Ratcliffe, provided us on a retreat, and he provided these meditations. And one of the topics that he addressed was one of authority. And it's one that he had to address, because now he basically said, because you're giving lay people now more authority, does that mean now that the bishops have less authority? Of course, that's not the case. But we all have authority, and we have it differently. And the best example that he gave was the 4 gospel writers. Because we have 4 gospel writers, we sort of have now a 360 of what occurred during the time. And was there competition between them? No. But we have a more complete story. And with the laity now, you have a more complete story. And with co-responsibility, people sometimes assume, does that mean then, like, if the laity in a parish now have more authority, are they then the ones making the decision versus the pastor, or in a diocese, the bishop? And that's not the case. There's 2 terms, decision-making and decision-taking. The synodal process really is about the decision-making. Are we consulting widely? Are we listening to all of the voices, or are we just listening to a few of the voices? And this is what the Synod really did. It really spoke to those on the margins. And you can only get the answers if you ask them. And I'm going to give you one example that still struck with me. When we were doing the diocesan synod, we had the listening sessions that took place in the parishes. We also had a session where we invited those who were receiving services from the St. Vincent de Paul. And we wanted to hear from them what's working well, what's not working well. And what they told us was, we so appreciate the money that you're giving us. We so appreciate the food that you're giving us. But you know what we're not getting from you? Is friendship. That stopped us in our tracks. And how else would we have heard that if we asked the question? So co-responsibility is really involved in that decision-making process on our parish councils and our dioceses of being more inclusive of those perhaps whose voices we had not heard before. The decision-taking will still rest with the pastor, with the bishop. We have parishes right now in our diocese that have established ministry teams. The head of that ministry team meets on a regular basis with the pastor, and they together now are basically in terms of what's those next steps within the parish. That's really what co-responsibility is. And you can see the tremendous role there that the lay people have. And the other thing that we, London, in this area that we heard, and we heard it across the province when we put together the synthesis report, people responded as if it was Father's church, and we didn't hear enough of this is our church. And I think what we're trying to, with the synodal approach, with the decision-making, with the listening, it's our church, and just hearing those voices from all areas.
I'll just add one quick point. Because I work so much with seminarians and priests, I tend to, when I'm reading about this synod, and I'm looking at the summary, I haven't read it all, it's really thick. And this sort of comes from my family therapy background. I think we have to figure out how is this going to help priests. Because I think if I were a priest, I don't want a lot more work. Yes, there is responsibility to be a pastor, but how can this be of a benefit? I still remember a professor when I went to UT, tiny little Dr. Epstein. She used to do a lecture, but it felt like a scolding. And I still remember her saying, when you're doing family therapy, you cannot help a family see the benefits of change. It will not happen. And so I do think we have to spend some time and be patient in trying to understand how is this going to benefit, and not just priests obviously, but us as laity and the church as well. And I think patience is huge here. I mean, to think that my great-grandmother grew up in a time when women didn't have a vote, well, that's just foreign to women today, right? But this is new, and it will take time, and patience is absolutely a virtue. There are some promising signs, but I don't think it's going to be fast, and that's okay. It's about doing it properly and getting everyone engaged, not getting it done quickly.
You can take a wild guess of the two authors for these, the next question. How can Assumption University and St. Peter's Seminary, 1 and 2, work together to promote synodal formation such as active listening, silent reflection, discernment, listening to the Word of God, and thoughtful sharing among both laity and the ordained? And we will start with Angela, and then Moira.
I think we've started, given tonight. I'd love to, for example, I'd love to see like an interdisciplinary course. You're far down the road, but I don't think our ideas are that far away. It would be great to have even like some kind of an elective course or something. Another idea, again, because of distance, is even some kind of online forum where ideas about synodality and related themes like women in the church, where people can dialogue, trying to respect the generation, that is, a quick and easy way that, again, that they can dialogue. It would be great to host that, moderate that. It'd be a very convenient way. It would probably pull more people in. Sometimes people share more when it's online, but absolutely some type of course to share these ideas together. And that is aligned with what the synod process is about, right? Is sharing those ideas and discerning together.
Since I'm in neither university, but speaking from another one, I do think that courses on synodality actually are essential. This links in with the question before as well, which I didn't respond to because in my head I was thinking these two are really talking about the same thing. Because when we're talking about active listening and discernment, etc., what I've discovered talking in parishes about synodality is that most people don't know what it is. And so they don't really. There really is space for a lot of education at a very informative and basic level before we get to the stage of saying, well, how do we do this, And I think, first of all, in universities, in seminary, we have to be asking those questions first, explaining synodality and having the students talk about their perception of synodality, and probably their perception is a lot greater because of the events of the past 10 years, say, at least especially since Pope Francis started with his more open version of synodality. He really opened the door to a much wider discussion of synodality from a theological perspective, but also from this very practical parish-based perspective. And so knowing, first of all, what we're really talking about, I think, is absolutely fundamental, and sometimes I don't find that that's the case. And the other question to me is always, why is synodality important? So with Linda saying, when she spoke to some group, actually asking the questions of them, then you get a reply that you wouldn't otherwise have had. And it's not just people in the margins, it's all of us really, including people in the margins, that needs to be asked questions. Well, what do you think? What do you think synodality means? Why is synodality important for the development of the church? Why is it important for my participation, your participation in the church, and how can we implement that? So these are just very initial questions that I think sometimes we jump over them because we're so enthusiastic about synodality, and I am, but we really need a kind of solid foundation as well, and that just really means education too. And the other thing is it needed? And if it's needed, why is there this push for synodality? What are the areas that the people in the synod, with all the conversations in the spirit and all the different documents that have come out and the 10 questions that were discussed at the last synod to be answered in June or July this year, why were those the ones selected? There are many other questions. So all those sorts of questions to me are really just fascinating. Why those 10 and not another 10? Because there are more than 10 questions. Obviously, you can't deal with everything at once. And so the whole process to me of synodality is very much long-term. It's sort of game-changing in a way in terms of decision-making, decision-taking, the structure of the church, the co-responsibility between the clergy and the laity. Really, in many ways, on both those topics, for there to be a much wider range of discussion and praying about what that really means and what is the role of the laity in the church. We do have a voice. I keep going back in my head to the Second Vatican Council that really talked about the importance of the laity and how it really inverted the hierarchy of the church and away from sort of that triangle like this with the curia at the top, laity at the bottom, to talking about the people of God, so everybody, not triangular anymore, but in this circle where everyone is of equal importance and everyone has a voice. And again, going back to this very basic knowledge and appreciation, I think, of the laity in particular, because priests do learn about this in seminary. But it's very hard, I think, for the laity to have a voice unless they have that equal opportunity to discover really what the church itself thinks of us as a laity, how important we are. Really, in that sense, all of us have a voice. And so, if I were setting up this course for St. Peter's and Assumption, and now we're going back to talking with seminarians and laity in the class as well, those are the sorts of questions I would like to pose.
So, Father Dennis, it looks like we have work to do over here.
Discuss how to give chances to educate more ladies to assimilate in this, but however, I have to be more stick to the doctrine and what the Catholic Church saying about this kind of important role. However, so maybe other opinions can be more supportive.
No, thank you. It's really, I think that's the value of talking, with other branches of the church. I did a talk on synodality with an Orthodox church in Boston a year ago, and it was really eye-opening to hear their take on the diaconate in particular, and it's sort of different from the Catholic Church, obviously, at the minute. But, the short answer to the question, should women be ordained to the diaconate? Well, I would say yes, but that's my answer. Because I think there's tremendous scope for that to happen. Is it official? No, it's not. So is that what people are working towards? Well, I think all of you know that this was one of the prime questions at the Synod, and not just then, but it has been in the air for quite some time. Dr. Phyllis Sagano has been talking about the history of deacons in the Catholic Church for a long time, and sort of pointing back to the idea that there were women in Scripture who were mentioned as deacons, but it turns out that that doesn't really mean the ordained diaconate the way it means today. So it's a slightly different thing. If deacon means being of service, yes, of course, women have always been of service in the church, and I think that's very important as a starting point. This year, at the beginning of the Synod, I think what was really important was that Cardinal Fernandez, who is the head of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, started off his talk at the Synod by saying that the church is, Pope Francis, by the way, let me go back a minute. Pope Francis has already said that ordination of women to the church, following the tradition of the church, is not possible. So the sort of push, that's another matter. We're talking about the diaconate, but just to give the background to that. And so Cardinal Fernandez was saying that he and the dicastery and Pope Francis do not think that the church is yet ready for women to be ordained to the diaconate. Now, they did not say women should not be ordained, and there is a clear distinction there, and for many people a very hopeful distinction. And Cardinal Fernandez, and for some people not, this is one of these areas where the church is divided, and we should just recognize that. Cardinal Fernandez said that the reason why Pope Francis is not sort of really pushing this to the very forefront of the 10 questions that were considered at the Synod is that he doesn't think we're ready for it, that the church as a whole is not ready for it. So we can't really look at it, and this has come up with Phyllis Sagano before, in terms of many of us in the Western churches, for example, are in leadership positions, or at least see the value of women in leadership positions, would like to see women being ordained to the diaconate. But there are other areas of the world where that is not the case. The cultural gap is pretty wide. The understanding of women's leadership, all those roles, it's just not uniform. So when somebody like Cardinal Fernandez says, the time is not right, I think this is a very important indication to most of us who maybe think women's ordination to the diaconate would be a good thing, that it just means the time is not right. It does not mean it will not happen. And I know there was pushback at the Synod on that very topic because there has been a real swell of emotion and reason in terms of people thinking that this would be a very good thing. I mean, I used to think myself when I attended a baptism of one of my grandchildren that I would love to do that. And that's just a personal reaction, to sort of be able to baptize your own child or your own grandchild is something kind of that, wishful thinking, but not impossible. And I think that's what applies here too. I think that Cardinal Fernandez actually submitted a written report as well, and what he said was that his dicastery, and these are his words, judges there is still no room for a positive decision by the magisterium regarding the access of women to the diaconate. But, when there's a but, you always know there's something positive still going on underneath. The dicastery thinks a particularly interesting way forward would be to analyse in depth the lives of some women who have exercised genuine authority and power in support of the Church's mission. And he's going back to famous saints like St. Catherine of Siena, who was able to persuade the Pope to return from Avignon during the Schismatic Church to Rome. I mean, she was a religious sister, she was able to persuade the Pope, and we're talking back in the 13th, I'm not sure, or 14th century, I'm not sure what century, I think it was the 13th, but you can Google that and find that. And he mentions many other people, including the modern day Dorothy Day. Most of us have heard of Dorothy Day. Maha, you were talking about social justice. She's a perfect exemplar of what a woman-led movement can do in the social justice issue, her own background and becoming a devout Catholic. And the Pope himself talking about Dorothy Day when he was over in the States canonizing, I think, St. Benedict Sarah. So there are many undercurrents, I think. There's a very, very real sort of wish from many of us seeking that sort of, would you call it leadership or would you call it service? I prefer to call it service in the church as a deacon. They're just saying just now that it's still on the table. There was a swelling again at the Synod that brought it back into the forefront. The issue has not gone away, it just has not been settled. So it's one of these things, it's like, watch this space.
Yeah, I'm very much on the fence. I haven't discerned enough. I guess for me the question isn't should women be deacons, but are women being called to be deacons? And again, as Mara said, it's a very we have personal thoughts about that. I think we just have to be careful because hierarchy in the church has not served us well historically. I think you have to be careful not to confuse title with value. Quick story, a couple years ago my mother was in the ICU, I was tired and stressed, and I grabbed in the hallway what I thought was a doctor, a nurse, and I started asking questions, am I in the right place, and a few other things, and then she stopped and said, excuse me, she said, I'm just the housekeeper. And I'm like, no, I said, hospitals are hotbeds for diseases and all kinds. I go, but your job is so important. So I think we have to be careful that titles don't necessarily mean value.
And the last question is for Maha, and it obviously revolves the churches in the East. And I know we have a lot of our Chaldean and Maronite and Melkite friends here tonight, so welcome. The question is, how do the deep historical roots and distinct liturgical practices of Middle Eastern Catholic churches, such as the Chaldean, Maronite, Melkite, and Syriac churches, contribute to the global conversation on women's roles in the church? So I'm going to pass this to Maha, but anyone else is welcome to join in.
Thank you. Again, go back to the Eastern Church. All the names been said today. So, however, one of the examples is our Chaldean Church. So here in Windsor, Ontario, I can say something about how get involved in the synodal discussions, especially the role of the women. So all these churches came from the East. Filling the gap for the role for women was done by the nuns and congregations being held in the Middle East before coming here. When we arrived to Canada, we saw there is no trust for any nun. In our country and other countries like Lebanon, Egypt, you can see nuns in the road. So they can cheer you, say hi, you can see them in the schools, in hospitals, in other social services. So this is their work. Actually, it is a big role in the church. In here, we couldn't find this. I don't know what's the law in Canada saying about this. So, but I'm saying, encouraging not only this part to be emerged, but also go back to the lay women that would be got all the desire to serve the church with all their mind, all their heart. So I'm not sure about if someone here would like to add, because I was having this discussion today. I was having a discussion with one of the ladies here, saying about how to get more involved in the church. We're in Canada. We are not in somewhere else, like in a third world country, and no one's gonna stop us. But the opportunity in the church has no regulations. Sometimes you see people have the privilege to stay 6-7 years in the same position. Do the catechism, do leadership, do everything. And then when one of the maybe ladies would like to involve and give her time and effort, she's been excluded. So it's still we need more discipline, in this case, more organization for this case. So I'm not sure one of the ladies here would like to add anything about the role of the women in our churches that have been being emerged here in Canada, not only in Middle East. So anyone, Miss Sabriya or Miss Sally, or maybe Miss Nahla, Miss Almas, Miss Hiba? No?
Suad is there. Suad is there.
Suad. Oh, Suad is here? Miss Suad. So yes, welcome Suad. So if you have anything to add to this topic, it's very important because I got a survey before coming to this place, and then asked the opinion by many ladies from different churches actually. I got some points in here. I don't want to highlight it very well, but I just gave some words about it. But if you just want to add about this one.
Thank you. So regarding our Chaldean Catholic women, 2014, we have been persecuted for a long time, and people, when you leave everything. You don't have anything to take with you. So, and then you have to settle places and ask for, apply for a place to go, a safe place. So all this time, it will influence women and the family, and they work hard like to supply for the daily basis, right? So education is not that, like it's hard for them to have education, because if you are not settled well, you cannot have extra time to go and read and follow and search, right? So I think in our community, we don't have a lot of those women who are highly educated to serve more in the church. But they are, in their heart, in their devotion, they would like to serve. And that's in the future that you can see more people are coming forward to help. And like lately, a teacher who came and said, why we don't have a youth group in English? And said, the pastor said, okay, we don't have someone to lead. Would you lead? And she said, yes. So she started. So this is like a positive indication that women are taking role in the church, and they are surviving, and they are working hard. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Saad. By the way, Ms. Saad, she's the Secretary of Holy Family Chaldean Catholic Church. Thank you, Saad, for your presence today. So, however, I think holding a general meeting every year is going to be like, a very good idea, especially for the Eastern churches who are like new to this country. So to hear the voices for every person, especially women. So still we came from a patriarch society, actually. So men are, what do you call it, like they're the top, they call it the head of the women. This is in our society, in our community. You can hear it many times. So, however, I don't know. So still, with this stage, for this development, but hopefully, and then there is a, light at the end of that tunnel. So anyone can add anything about this discussion? Yes, Ms. Sabria. Ms. Sabria also, she's one of the catechists in the Holy Family Chaldean Catholic Church. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Just the reason we don't have too many to serve in the church, because I think the main thing is the language of Chaldean. Suppose everybody to serve, to know the language of Chaldean, writing and reading. There's, I think, maybe reason, Like for me, I can't speak perfect, but reading and writing is hard for me. So I think, this is the main reason, for we don't have, huge also. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So this is one of the reasons we hear the churches of the East, believe if you have fluency, writing and reading, you're going to have more opportunities in the church. However, you are dedicating your time and effort for free. So is that justice? That's what I'm saying in here. So it's not. Because the main language, the official language of this country is English beside the French. It's not Chaldean, it's not Aramaic. However, it's liturgical language, yes. We agree, and this tradition we should hold it to the future, but it's not going to be essential and treat people like one of the characteristics. If you don't have this, it means you don't have any opportunities. So we have to be very open-minded and evaluate, where are we going to our churches? So for the new generations, I believe all these languages are not going to be there. Yes. So, but only the English and beside French. That's it. So, anyone would like to? So, yeah.
No, thank you. And I think what you're really highlighting again, I think I totally agree with this, is that fundamental education is always needed, whether it's linguistic, theological, whatever it is. People can be at a disadvantage when they don't have any of that training. I mean, I always admire anybody in another country who's had to start from scratch. It's not as if I could speak Chaldean. I speak Scottish and English, and that's the only two languages. But seriously though, I mean, it's true. It's not, maybe disadvantage is the wrong word, but it's, to me again, proof positive that everybody has a voice, whether it's in Chaldean language or in English language or any other kind of language. I would just encourage you in your churches, you probably already doing, and you already have a kind of history of synodality, clearly, historically, to find out more about that and to put that into practice, both in the general Catholic way, but in your own distinctive cultural and linguistic way as well. I think that would be a tremendous contribution to the Catholic Church.
Great. Thank you, Maria, for this point. Actually, before like 2 years, I still remember, we've been given a link to put our opinion
That's right.
for the synodality,
Yeah.
right? Remember, Sabah?
Yeah.
So, however, we put everything, all our pain in there as women, but nobody heard us. Nobody, just nothing. Sorry for this to say. I just be very, very frankly.
I hope there's more
To say it.
opportunities.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank our distinguished panelists for a wonderful question and answer period. But before we conclude the evening, I'm happy to open up the floor